and welcome. The world is facing shortages when it comes to food. A lot more people have to be fed than ever before. How are we going to do it, and what role can agribusiness play in this? Well, I'm joined by Alan Winney, Chairman of Emerald Grain Private Limited and former Chairman of Queensland Sugar Australia. Alan, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Nice to see you, Govin.
Right. So tell us, what are the, I mean, I know that you're more of a, you've been in the grain aggregation business and, you know, sort of massive, I would imagine, silos of wheat and grain and then collecting it from all over Australia and shipping it out.
Correct, yeah.
Right. So tell us, what are the kind of challenges that you see in managing the food sort of problem, and how do we kind of resolve it, or how can business resolve it better?
Well, I think that the challenge for global agribusiness, and not just the company Emerald Grain that I've just sold, is
to Sumitomo.
Is that 9 billion people are projected to be in the world in 2050. So some are saying as high as 9.6 billion people. 90% of those people are living in the Northern Hemisphere, and the world is growing at 65 million people per year. So the food requirement to feed those people is growing even faster because of growth in per capita GDP in many countries, particularly in East Asia and South Asia. We're seeing the food demand change and the type of product that they're requiring change, which means that it's exponential in terms of the food demand.
So when you say type of product,
there's a change in diet at different points of GDP per capita. In India and China, important, Pakistan, Indonesia are all very much within that loop. But once GDP per capita goes above $5,000 then people move away from rice and pulses and move to noodles and flatbreads and other products, and above $10,000 per capita they start eating more protein, and that might be chicken and in some countries in pork and beef, and obviously not in India. But so we see a changing diet, and we see a demand for different types of products. And you know, India is now self-sufficient in rice and is exporting rice, and the diet is starting to change.
So which is the bigger challenge, the changing diet patterns, or is it the fact that many people don't have access to food, in your mind?
Well, I think that what's happening is the population's growing and the food requirements are changing. So the actual demand for food is increasing, not in a linear fashion, in a broader fashion. So with 90% of the people in the Northern Hemisphere, the Southern Hemisphere is increasingly being called on, South America, Australia, Africa, to provide more and more food. So world trade is increasing, and corporate agribusiness is responding to that by lots of consolidations and mergers, and globalisation of many companies is occurring, and we're starting to see very big food companies evolving now in a similar manner to we saw oil companies, the Seven Sisters of Oil in the 1940s, and the mining companies merged together in the 1990s.
But that also sounds frightening.
It is, it's quite concerning. I think the world will be able to respond and produce more food to feed the population that the world will grow towards. It will start to stabilise a little bit after 2050.
Can you share some insights from your having operated a grain aggregation business, and maybe what other countries could do in order to manage their own inventories in a more efficient way?
Yeah. On the business I've been involved in, grain accumulation, infrastructure management, in sugar and fertiliser, wool, certain dairy, so across the spectrum, similar sorts of issues. Getting better infrastructure, more modern infrastructure. In Australia, for example, a lot of the storage and handling system, the railway lines are 100 years old. The infrastructure needs to be invested in now. In many importing countries that are, as their population's growing, they're needing to import more food, then they will need to update their infrastructure as well.
Right. So infrastructure is a key.
Infrastructure is a key, and the consolidation and globalisation that's occurring, a lot of that is to get control of the infrastructure, and larger vessels and larger ports, and the companies that are acquiring firms all around the world. They might be the Cargills and the Wilmars. Increasingly, they were European companies, the ABCDs that we'll hear about, ADM, Bunge, Cargill, Louis Dreyfus. Well, now you're seeing Wilmar, Olam, Noble, COFCO. Many of the Asian companies are playing a very big role. The Japanese trading houses investing all over the place, and you see multi-origin, multi-commodity companies that started off as trading companies but now are infrastructure owners, and they own the processing, and the whole supply chain is being filled.
Right.
Good example is Wilmar. Wilmar are palm oil. They own their own plantations through Indonesia. They're moving that into Papua New Guinea. They're in Malaysia. but they'll process that palm oil, they'll refine it themselves, they'll put it into their own branded labels, and they'll sell it on supermarket shelves in China and India and places like that. The whole supply chain is being linked through that type of structure.
Right. So you're saying there's been forward integration as well as backward integration?
Horizontal and vertical, yeah. So and those companies are getting very strong and very large, and
right.
and you know, like the largest operators in Australia that we're competing with are Cargill, Glencore. ADM has just tried to make a takeover, so you're seeing some very big companies coming.
So you're talking about the Grain Corp takeover?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. So what about regulation? I mean, what is the role of regulation? And I'm sure that differs from country to country, and can that be a hindrance?
Yeah, I think the regulators need to not have a national perspective, they need to have a global perspective and look at what's happening. Some takeovers that are being blocked probably shouldn't be, because they're being looked at in a national perspective. But I think the access to infrastructure, the price transparency to farmers, those types of issues need to be considered by the regulators when they're approving or not approving. They might approve more transactions they are at the moment, but they might approve with conditions. So an important role for the regulators in the years ahead.
Is to, and to not be sentimental about protecting national interest.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah, and they shouldn't, when they concerned that competition's being reduced, they shouldn't just look at what's happening in that one country.
Right.
They should be looking at what's the impact on a global scale.
So last question. So how are things looking for you here on? I mean, your own company has been fully acquired by Sumitomo.
Correct.
And it's all falling into a it's all falling into place as a global piece, if one may say so. So what's next?
Well, for me, I think I'll probably take most of this year off and look at some other businesses. I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I can't help myself really. Right. But you know, I think the opportunity that was there for Emerald was that the staff and the customers of Emerald and the farmers who supply Emerald have the opportunity to go into a company that could be one of the global players. And myself as the founder and the other owners of the business, 55 staff owned the business, you know, wanted that opportunity to emerge, and you know, I thought it was the right time for the business to do that. So hopefully I have most of this year, and I've got time to think about where I go next.
And hopefully it will be in the agribusiness space.
I think it probably will be.
Thank you very much for being with us, Alan.
No problem.